Hello friends, we are back here with the Vox AC30 Super Twin chassis, and this video, my goal really is to just kind of comb through it and try and find anything that sticks out right away as being wrong, as well as double check the resistor values and try and figure out where they're located within the schematic. I could not find a layout for this amplifier, so we're going to just kind of have to figure it out as we go in relation to the schematic, which is pretty chaotic looking if I don't say so myself. So yeah, that's kind of the goal, and we're just going to start here, and then we'll shift over to the other side of the chassis as well. But since this is already up, we're going to go ahead and just visually inspect this, and I will not make you guys sit through just, probably an hour of me checking every little thing one by one, but I will try and point out any of the things I find along the way. So that's the plan for today. And yeah, let's get to it. So there are a few things that I noticed that really stood out as fairly concerning and, shows some perhaps poor solder work before. So the first one I will point out is this joint right here. See if I can get a close up on that. I don't know if you can see that, but this lead is, well, it moves as I move the lead. So you can see it's not actually connected on that end. And then if that weren't bad enough, the other end of the lead, so I can get that to focus here, is also completely loose. And both of these actually are. So hopefully you'll be able to see that. So that's not great. So those are some very bad solder joints here and here. Big glob of solder right over here. Some other things I noticed. These resistors. So the ones that look like they are toasted to a crisp. See if I can get a zoom in on one of those. Those are all 1.5K resistors in the kind of red jackets or red shielding. They are absolutely roasted looking. However, they did measure totally fine, but we will be swapping those because they just look like they've, seen much better days. And then the other resistors with the blue, you can see that. So those are 100 ohm resistors, and they all look fairly okay. They are J-hooked. So I get to focus. You can see they're kind of J-hooked to the old leads there. But this one in the middle right here is totally fried. I don't know if you can see that, but it's got this black line over by the white tolerance band there. There we go. Right in the center of your screen. And yeah, that one is totally toasted, and that one measured, I couldn't get a good measurement on it actually, but when I was able to get something showing up, it was 200 plus ohms. So that one's completely fried. So we'll definitely be replacing all of those. I believe there's something, people say about the 100 ohm being just, pretty hard on power tubes. So we might change that value anyways, but I need to do some more research on that. Otherwise, we've got like the original, or at least it appears to be original, 75 ohm resistor here, which, let's see, there's this one too. This is another, looks like original. This is a 22 ohm, I want to say. There's 22K, excuse me. 22K resistor there. Those look original to me. And then, as I suspected, this black lead right here, this is the ground connection of the can cap, and the other two are not being used, and they're replaced by these. We can see the RS filter cap there. Not sure if that's original. RS, I'm assuming, means radio spare. So there's that. And then looking over here at the wiring for the power transformer, this was, like I mentioned before, this is I believe, very late 60s to early 70s power transformer for an AC30. But you can see the solder joints on those connections, those two yellow, they're not actually fished through the eye of the pin, they're just kind of resting on top. I don't know if you can see that, but right there in the center of your screen. So not great there. And then obviously all these joints tagged or hooked up to this tag board, they're pretty rough. You can see how mangled the leads got. So lots of resoldering needed here. Some all new resistors here, replacing all of those. And then all the filter caps will obviously be replaced. And then I don't know enough yet to determine for biasing what resistor is doing what here. So these might stay or they might not, but they both measure dead on to what they should. So functionally they're fine, but if I need something different to change the bias, then we will replace those, obviously. All right, now we can go ahead and shift over to the main side of the chassis. These are so awkward to put on a workbench and have them positioned for a overhead camera here. So apologies, it's just not ideal. We're definitely going to have to, maybe adjust my camera position for working on this amp. But for right now, we're going to keep it, and I will just again handhold the camera to show you guys anything I find that sticks out. But you can see from the overhead with the top boost out of the way a bit more than you were able to see last video. We can see some additional replaced carbon films here, another one over here, and then everything else looks pretty much original as far as I can tell. I don't know what this is at all. We've got all of these original caps, which is, I guess, good. I know some of these will definitely need to be replaced or should be replaced, but I'm not sure which ones are the coupling caps, which one are the bypass caps. I don't know yet. I need to look at this a bit closer. There's some definitely rough solder joints. I'm seeing that now. So we're going to go ahead and comb through everything, and I will show you guys close-ups of anything I find. So I just got done reviewing this side of the chassis, and I only noticed a few things. Everything looked fairly good to me, and everything I measured seemed to measure okay, except for just a couple pieces. So the first thing I'm going to point out are these input resistors here. So you've got these 1 megs, you'll see side by side, and then on the sides of the actual receptacles you have the 68Ks. Now this pair and this pair each measured, I believe, like 37K, which tells me that based off of how they're wired in, that they all measure fine, but if I were to unsolder them, they would measure fine, but together they measure a bit lower. Now this pair right here on the, I believe this is the Brilliant channel, these were measuring 70K, and then I could not get a measurement on this 1 meg. So I don't really know what's going on there, but these were all fine. These 3 I had some issues with. So that's the first thing. The next thing I noticed is I think I solved the trem issue, or the Vibe trem channel not working at all issue. And I think it's because this lead is not connected. I don't know if it was supposed to go here or here. It looks like it just broke off right here. So I'm going to guess, shot in the dark, that's probably why the trem channel has no signal. So that's that's kind of a funny one. What else here? There's this resistor right here that is very bizarre to me. You can kind of see it just in the center of your screen. It's the purple, yellow, gold band resistor right there, right next to the trim pot. It's a 3-band resistor. I've never seen that before. I've never heard of a 3-band resistor before, so I don't know how to measure that, or rather how to read that. So it measured, I believe, 880K. It looks pretty fried. I don't know what it is, so that's a mystery to me. And then obviously right next to that, we've got this trim pot, which does not appear to be original. And I don't know what this is for. I'm assuming it's something to do with the trem, because I know like this is the wire for the trem foot switch. And then I'm, again, educated guess, this is probably something to do with the trem channel, which is why that's not working. And then it would make sense that this would be something to do with the vibrato / trem in this amp, maybe some kind of balance piece, but we could definitely get a better trim pot in there that's not sticking straight up. What else? Two other things. So two other resistors that measured off out of the whole amp. All of this basically measured perfectly fine. This whole back, although, man, it's so hard to reach some of these resistors way in the back there. I don't know how you solder anything back there. That's just a no-go unless I really have to. But right here, these two resistors, you see these two carbon films, and then next to those two carbon films that were soldered in, you've got that yellow, purple, orange, silver band. That is a 47K that reads 90K. And then right next to that, you see that, hard to see, but brown, green, orange, silver band right there in the center of your screen. And that is a 15K that measures 27K. So those are really the only two that measured, fairly often enough at least to want to replace them. Everything else measured really, really close, which is good news. And then as far as all of these caps here, I don't know just by looking at them if any of these need to be replaced. Now, these are all these WEMAs, I believe, are what you want to see and are good. But then you've got this cap right here, which I don't know the brand. It says British made on it. You've got one there. You've got one back there, right here. And then you've got another one right here. Those ones are different than the WEMAs, and I don't know why that is. So those ones might need to be replaced. But the WEMAs, I'm guessing you don't want to replace unless you have to. Outside of that, everything looked pretty, standard as far as I know. There is this giant glob of solder and a bunch of leads connected right here. That's not great. There's a few little areas like that where you can obviously see that things were touched up. But otherwise, it all looks pretty good. I haven't checked the top boost area yet, but I don't have a schematic for that. And it sounded good, so I'm just going to kind of leave that for right now. And then the capacitors here, they're kind of just J-hooked on there. I don't know if you can see that. And this one's just floating. So we can do something better than that for sure. But overall, I think it looks pretty good. Now I will plan to replace all of these carbon films with carbon comps. There's another one all over here. One right here. So those all get replaced with carbon comps. There are these very bizarre caps right here that are just really gross looking. There's one there. There's a couple of them. There's a couple over here with the, let's see if I can reach it. You can kind of see. I'll move this out of the way. There's one right there. Then another one right there tied with another resistor. I've never seen those before. Those look really gross. Hard to read the measurement or the value on those. You got these little Hunts black caps here. I've heard that these are bad and you want to swap these. So put those on the list once I figure out what they are. And then there's one other weird cap right here, if I can thread the needle. I've never seen one like that. You can see it's kind of this like gray-green color. But other than that, it looks good. I'm actually pretty pleased. Honestly, this is better than I was expecting. So I'm pretty stoked. I think this won't be too bad. Just kind of replacing some caps, just a couple resistors, making sure things are connected where they should be. I need to figure out where this is supposed to go. I mean, it is really tough to determine what is what with these. This is just so much more complex and difficult to read than a vintage Fender. I mean, even if I go under, I don't know if you guys can see this, but there are jumper leads under the eyelet board here, or whatever you want to call this, tag board. And so it's so hard to follow what is connected to what. It's kind of just chaos to me, to be honest, and just way more difficult to interpret than, a vintage Fender, which I'm, still very much a rookie with, but, I've got at least some of that under my belt and I can figure those out more intuitively than I can this. So lots and lots to learn here, lots to try and figure out. And I gotta, man, these schematics are really hard to follow with something like this. So I've got my work cut out for me. All right, we are back at it, and I feel rejuvenated and so much more confident. Still, I've got so much to learn. Let's be very clear on that. But I found online on, let's see, turretboard.org. Somebody created a kind of a layout where they drew out. Let me see if I can show you guys that. They drew, essentially a AC36 normal model, every single component on here where all the leads connect to, both the top of the chassis and the bottom of the chassis, which is proven to be extremely helpful. And what I decided to do last night off camera is really just study this and check every single piece, every single component, and cross-reference it with this layout, and then mark down all of the changes I saw, the parts that don't seem correct or maybe are a different value but look original to the amp, and kind of laid that all out there so I have a fairly clear idea of what's what. If I can, I'm going to try and put it up in this video as well so that you seasoned guys that are so graciously willing to offer some guidance can maybe chime in and offer some more help with this project, because I definitely need it. There's just so much to learn here. And and then I've kind of put together a to-do list and a tentative buy list as well as far as what parts I think I need to pick up. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into it. So first and foremost, I learned and confirmed that this cap right here, this cap right here, and this cap right here are all the cathode bypass caps. So I plan on swapping all three of those. Those are 25 microfarad, 25 volt, just like you see in fenders. So we will be swapping those with 25 microfarad, 50 volt caps, which I have tons and tons of mod caps for that. So that's no big deal. Let me go ahead and zoom in a little bit so you guys can see better. So that's the first noteworthy thing, is those will all be swapped with mod caps. And then moving on down the line, and we'll save the pots for a little bit later. Now we've got obviously this carbon film, if you can see that, that has been replaced. So we are going to swap that back with a carbon comp, and then right next to it, according to this layout, should be a 270K, whereas a 220K was swapped in there that measured 220K. So I'm not sure if there's a 270K resistor readily available nowadays in carbon comp form. I'd have to look it up. I've never heard of that value before. It's probably fine, but I've got it on my list to double check. But for sure, we will be swapping this carbon film with a carbon comp. And then moving down the line, we've got this cap right here, which shows up as a 47,000 picofarad, which would be a 0.047 microfarad cap. We see that right here. And then next to it, there's just a resistor. There is no capacitor on the layout. And this capacitor right here is a 0.1 microfarad 400 volt WEMA. It's got, it looks like it's original. It's got the paint there. So I'm not 100% sure on this and what this is doing in the circuit. So that's one thing that I need to figure out still. But that's interesting that it's not actually even on the layout drawing here. And then I forgot to mention too, I did buy, there's a book, I guess, out that has layouts and schematics for all of the Vox amps. So I did purchase that, but it's coming from, I think, Europe, and it's going to be a while. So we're kind of, I don't want to wait, a month for a book to come in to get working on this. So we're just going to keep moving forward, and then hopefully I can crowdsource some additional insights. So that's one interesting thing, is this cap does not exist elsewhere. And then there's the other cathode bypass cap. And then here on the very end, we've got a 0.01 and then another 0.01 WEMA cap here. Again, they've got the red paint on them. They look original. However, according to the schematic, or the layout, excuse me, those should be 47,000 picofarad or 0.047s instead of a 0.01. So that's a pretty big difference, 0.01 versus 0.047. So I don't really know, again, what those are doing. But that's a big thing to note. But they look factory. So this could be part of the treble versus the normal model. I don't know enough yet to be able to say. So those are kind of the main takeaways here. So not a ton on this top board. Everything looks fairly good. Now moving up to the pots, there is a 330K resistor, and it's going where on this layout it shows where that lead goes. So there's a lead going from the far right terminal over to the board here in various spots, and there is no resistor there. However, on my amp, there is a 330K resistor on the far right blade or far right terminal of each of the volume pots. Why that is, I don't know. There also exists the just regular wire on these two pots. So that's another difference I noticed. And then in addition, off of the wiper, the middle terminal of the pots, there is a 220 picofarad cap, and it's the same kind of cap as this really gross, waxy looking one. There are 220 picofarad on the middle wiper for each of the pots here. And then those leads are going to the exact same spot on the board as the resistor and other lead going off of the far right terminal. So that is also another change that is interesting and I don't see on the layout. So that kind of covers all of this area up here. If you guys have any insights into any of that, such as what the difference these two caps will make, the value difference there, what in the world is going on with these caps and extra resistors over here, please, and then the Black Hunts caps. Any insights there, that would be much appreciated. I am very much dreading having to do any work up here because there's literally no space. So I'm not sure how people do it. Gosh, yeah, I honestly have no idea what to do if I need to access or solder anything back here. There's just zero space without burning stuff. So that's another thing I got to figure out. If I have to do anything there, what do I do to get access there? Because it doesn't look like you can easily lift up the board. There's a screw right here, and there's another screw over here, it looks like, to lift the board, but obviously there's resistors and a cap over in this side in the way. So just really tricky, just not very easily serviceable like a Fender's. This is just another level as far as complexity and just, I don't know, confusion, at least on my part. So that covers this whole area. All of this is factory and looks original and tested fine as mentioned, other than a little confusion here at the Brilliant channel that I haven't figured out yet, but that was discussed earlier. So moving on down here to the lower board, there's some more things to note. So obviously this was the cathode bypass cap, that we'll be swapping that. This trim pot does not look original, and it's not. This says, I was able to scratch off some dirt on it to read it. It says it's a 250K log pot, trim pot. It measured 300K, and then the actual layout calls for a 500K log pot here. So that is one thing we will definitely have to replace. And I'm not sure how readily available that value is. I bought, some of these trim pots for another project, but these are all much lower resistance, like 10K or 25K or something like that. So that's another thing that is on the list that I'll go over as far as what I need to purchase still. This orange wire, I did figure out that it should be going here. Now, I mentioned this was part of the trem channel and is likely the cause for the trem channel not working, or not no signal getting from the input to the speakers. So one unfortunate thing is this thing got blasted with a soldering iron, and you can actually see exposed wire right here, which is not what you want. Now, the good thing is there's plenty of slack to be able to, I could literally just cut it right here, take off the insulation and solder it right there and be totally fine. So that will be the plan, to make that nice and clean. And then this lead for the pedal, which is mysteriously not on the other end, we're just going to go ahead and remove that, and I just need to figure out how to wire this to have the vibe trim always on, because the only time I would ever use that channel is to have that on. So I'm just going to wire it to be always on. I'm assuming I just need to ground out one of these leads or something along those lines, but I do have to figure that out still. So again, if you guys know, drop it in the comments. So continuing on down the line here, we've got these two carbon film. Again, as mentioned, they tested fine, but we will be replacing those with carbon comps. And then right next to it, we have these two resistors, and those also tested poorly and will be replaced. This is a 47K, this is a 15K, and those were out of tolerance enough to replace. So we will be replacing those with newer carbon comps. And then this capacitor between them is according to the schematic or the layout, excuse me, it says it should be a 47,000 picofarad or a 0.047. So the same as this right here. However, this one is a 4,700 picofarad. So either this layout drawing just wrote that wrong, or this should be a much bigger cap than it actually is. Let's see if I... Oh, this one, okay, this is a good example. So this is a 0.047. You can see how much larger it is than this. So this should be here according to the layout. So that's one thing. Again, I don't know enough about where this is in the circuit to be able to say, you know, what it's doing and whether that's going to cause an issue or if it's part of it being a treble model or not. I'm learning, guys. There's a lot to learn. So I don't know enough yet to answer those questions. And then moving down here, this is correct. This should be a 4,700 picofarad, which it is. And then this one, which measures 47,000 picofarad, it's actually, according to the layout, should be a 4,700 picofarad. So it seems that these two should be swapped. However, there is still paint on the solder joints, and it looks the same as the paint everywhere else. So my leading theory for this is that this was a mistake from the factory and that these two should have been swapped and they were installed wrong. Maybe not. That's the only thing that makes sense to me because this is the value that should go here and this is the value that should go here, and they look factory. So let me know what you guys think there, but there's a chance I might just swap these once I get confirmation. Hopefully I can figure out where in the schematic this is to be able to confirm what the values should be, but I will likely swap those. Oh gosh, do I want to do that or do I want to leave it original? It depends what they do in the circuit. So I tend to lean towards leaving things original, I guess. Yeah, what am I saying? Let's keep it spinning the amp as far as I can tell since the beginning, assuming it's not super detrimental to the tone, which I doubt it is. We will leave that. I've made my decision, but it is interesting regardless. And then moving down here, this is where things get very, very confusing. There's lots of changes and things here that are kind of hard to follow. So the first, these two caps right here, these are 0.047s, and according to the layout, these should be, let's see, 0.15s. 0.15. Yeah, it's very confusing, the drawing on here. It says 0,15 microfarad. I know comma, I believe, means decimal point for these kind of things. So these should be, according to the layout drawing here, C6, C9 should be 0.15 microfarads. Again, this could be something to do with the treble model versus the normal model that this is supposedly replicating, but just a noteworthy piece there, and those are the original solder joints as well. So that's one thing to note. And then this cap right here, this measures as a 2200 picofarad, whereas the layout calls for a 4700 picofarad. So again, original solder joint, original cap. What's it doing there? Is it, you know, a big change, a little change? What is it doing? I don't know. That's what I'm trying to learn, which is very, very difficult. But that's where I'm at, guys. Okay, beyond that, it gets more interesting as we continue down. So we've got a carbon film resistor right here. Now this carbon film is a 10K and does not exist on the layout. So as far as I can tell, because this lead is obviously going up to the, which is on the same tag as the carbon film, this is going up to the treble boost circuit up here. So I'm guessing this has something to do with the treble boost circuit. I don't know. I need to find an example with the treble boost built in or something that shows this modification to be able to tell if this is meant to be here or not. But as far as I can tell, this is meant to be just an open slot and is being used for something related to this now by whoever built and installed this. In the same token, there is, going off of this large capacitor, a 33 microfarad 450 volt. Now, this is, again, not on the layout. However, I believe this is correct for the top boost circuit being added in. So, but that is something that does not exist on this layout. And then this red lead, I followed it, and it is going to pin 6 of the 12AX7 for the top boost, which is the plate. So just a little thing to note there. And obviously these green wires are the heaters, piggybacking off of the lamp here. What else? This red lead that you can see here, it's kind of like, just like a bridge across. That is not on the layout. I'm not sure what it's doing there. So that's a little confusing to me. But yeah, I have no idea what this is for. And is not, as mentioned, on the layout. What else is there? And then there is another lead here, this black lead, that is going from here to ground. So it's going from this pin right here, which is, let me see, 37. And it is going to ground, and that does not exist on the layout. So those are the major changes that I found in reviewing all of the components. And then obviously, as far as things that I want to swap, we've got the cathode bypass caps, as already mentioned. The electrolytics we'll swap for obvious reasons, just to be sure. The carbon films will be swapped, and then these 2 carbon comps will be swapped, and then TBD on things like these Hunt's capacitors. Okay, did I miss anything? Let me confirm through my notes. Nope, that all looks good. And then as far as the output here for the speakers, I did confirm and find out that the blue is the 16 ohm, the green is the 8 ohm, which makes sense. This jack is connected to the, let me zoom out. This jack is connected to the 16 ohm, and the cab is a 16 ohm cab, so that makes sense. Now my plan is to have jacks for both the 8 ohm and 16 ohm output, so I can run it into different cabs, kind of whatever I want. So we will be figuring out a way to either modify the head cab or install a junction box like I did in my AC10 to enable us to be able to use that 8 ohm tab output if I want to. All right, so now moving on to the underside here, and I will just have to get some B-roll to show you guys of this because I don't want to flip over the whole chassis. This is such an inconvenient platform to show on camera. I've got my camera set up that's basically locked in stationary, this overhead view, and I can't easily move it around or have an over-the-shoulder view or anything like that. And yeah, it's just not built well for this. Works great for fenders, but for Voxes, not so much. Oh, before I forget, a cage nut. That's another thing that needs to be found, as well as all new screws for all of the nuts there. So moving on down to the underside here, what we discovered is exactly kind of what I thought. The can cap is not being currently used. It is just there for show. And then we've got these 2 capacitors here that are taking place of the dual 16 microfarad can cap. These were 33 microfarad. We will be swapping in a new can cap that is a FNT 16 microfarad dual can cap. And then going off of that, these black wires I discovered are from the choke. So that all makes sense to me. And then there is kind of a joint grounding system here. And there is this 33 microfarad, which was the solder was failing on this, as I showed you guys. So that will be replaced, that capacitor. And then there's a 250 microfarad, 25 volt according to the layout. In my amp, it is a 220 microfarad, 63 volt, and it does look like the original cap. So we will be swapping with a 250 microfarad, and then we'll try and find something that's 63 volts or higher just to be sure. I do have some mod caps that are 250 microfarad, 25 volts like the layout shows, but I think we'll go for a higher rating to match what's in the amp currently. Other things on here, obviously we already talked about all of these resistors. Now after looking at the resistors up on the main side of the amp, they look kind of equally dingy and roasted like the ones do down here, the original 1.5Ks. So I thought about just keeping them because they all measured fine. However, I lifted up one of them and it is like totally roasted on the underside that you can't see. So we are going to move forward with swapping those. Now, because they're in an area that gets super hot, I am wondering if I should swap in something that has more heat tolerance, maybe a higher wattage, higher heat tolerance resistor set there for the 1.5Ks and 100 ohms. So let me know in the comments what you guys think there, if that sounds like a good idea or if I should just maintain carbon comps there. And then the resistor that I now understand is assisting with the bias. We will be keeping that and checking how that works out once we start the amp up and start to bias it, but it is not the stock value, which is, let's see, 50. This is a 75 ohm, so it seems like it's already been modified slightly for probably more modern wall voltages. So we will move forward with the assumption that that is fine and adjust as necessary. Okay, what else am I missing? All right, I think that's about it as far as like takeaways, reviewing the layout. So now let's go ahead and just go through the game plan in all the parts I plan to buy. And yeah, we've got a 500K trim pot, 500K log trim pot, 3 25 microfarad, 25 volt bypass caps, dual 8 microfarad cap, which will swap in for these two that are down here, which were 10 microfarad, but the layout calls for dual 8s. And I do have that as well in F&T. A 47K carbon comp, which will replace this one. A 15K comp, which will replace this one. 3 10Ks, so there's one 10K, two 10K, and then this one down here is another 10K. So those will all be swapped with carbon comps. One 22K carbon comp, which was this one right here. So replacing all of the carbon films. 4 100 ohm resistors for down here by the power tubes. Again, higher heat tolerance resistors, TBD on that. Let me know what you guys think. And then likewise 4 1.5K resistors. 2 33 microfarad 450 volt caps. So we want to replace this one right here and then replace the one down here on the underside of the chassis. 3-prong cord. So the 3-prong here is quite short, so I want it to be longer so that I can more easily reach outlets. So we will be swapping that. Diodes. This was one question I had as far as, artificial center tap, or, I've seen people use diodes on like the rectifiers or the power tubes as kind of a safety measure. I really like that idea. I don't fully understand how it works yet. I need to figure that out still, and also what diodes to get for that sort of thing, but I do like that concept. Non-cloth covered wire to match. So all the wire I have is cloth covered, like vintage Fender style. So I don't have anything that's got this kind of plastic coating. So I need to find some replacement wire just so I have it on hand. A lot of the wire has been pretty chewed up with a soldering iron, like this right here. This one got chewed up pretty good. This one I mentioned before, showing exposed wire where it was melted. So I don't know what's factory, what's not, but definitely the crawl space here is insanely tight. So there's a chance we might need to replace wire, and I want to have the right wire. So it looks okay. And then a dual 16 microfarad F&T can cap from the main electrolytics. I have that. And then the 220 microfarad 63 volt that we talked about earlier down here as well. So that's my list of stuff to buy. Not a ton, actually. So everything seems more straight than I thought when I first purchased it, which is good. And then what to do. So here's my little to-do list. We've got to connect this orange wire for the trim. We'll cut it and have this be a bit more clean. Connect that. We've install a tap for both the 8 ohm and 16 ohm tap for the head cab. We want to get rid of all of this electrical tape nonsense and replace with heat shrink. You can see that where applicable. The top boost card I still have to review. I need to find a schematic and hopefully a layout for that so I can better understand what's going on there, but currently just operating on the assumption it works and is okay because that is less critical. And it also has a pot, I believe, that can turn it off from being in the circuit. I'm sure it's partially in the circuit, but and then the top boost guard, I've still got to review that and figure out what's going on in there and if it was done correctly or not. But that's kind of lower priority because, yeah, it sounded good before, and it's, yeah, I'm not. And then the top boost card, that is, and then the top boost card, that is something we need to review still. I need to find a schematic and a layout for that to make sure, you know, that was done correctly. But it seemed to function fine before when I was able to just test the amp real quick. So I'm not too worried about that right now. And then adding new silicon in there because it is coming apart. I need to do the mod for the trem to always be on and remove this gray lead because it's useless right now. I need to figure out the grounding with the 100 ohm resistors. You know, I believe Lyle from Sonic Audio has talked about this specific area right here on, see what this is. I think it's V1. Yeah, it's very confusing. So this is V1, this is V2, this is V8, V9, and V7. Explain that to me. It just makes no logical sense at all. It is so confusing. So let me repeat that for you. V7, V9, V8, V1, V2. Wild. Once I learned that, it started to make more sense when I kind of started following the wires and everything, but man, could not be more confusing. But anyways, off of V1, there is this little connection off of pin 4 that goes to ground. And from what I understand, this can be a source for additional ground hum with this amplifier. And if you cut that and then do something with some resistors, the 100 ohm resistors, which I haven't figured out yet, that can aid in reducing hum. So that is something we will be looking into further. What else? The power switch is loose. I can move it around with my hand. So that needs to be tightened for sure. New nuts and bolts for the chassis and for the top boost card to be able to sit in correctly. New screws for the chassis of the slider board. And new screws for the chassis of the cab. And then I need to split up the leads here on this tag board for the bias circuit because they're all crammed in one eyelet for no reason. And then there's also just some not great work with the tag board here coming off of the power transformer. So I have a tag board with bigger eyelets so that we can fit things a bit easier. Instead of just kind of tack soldering something onto it, we can actually fit it through and get a good connection. So that's something I'll also address down the line. So that's a lot of stuff, but that is the game plan. And yeah, I think, you know, this is not as daunting as I thought it was going to be because it's not a total rebuild and is fairly straightforward. So really the next thing is just trying to not break any of these tabs on the board here because I know they can be super fragile when you heat them up. So that's something I've been warned about time and time again, and we're going to do our absolute best to avoid any of that. But we'll see. First time working on a Vox, first time doing anything like this, so I'm excited.